All right, welcome to We Up Report. This is your host, Mr. Blow Your Minds. And we got a nice show for you today. Today's date being December 19th, 2021. And before I get into that, we're going to give you for your information today. Today being December 19th, 2021. But on December 19th of 1675, there was called the King Philip's War. Colonial militias with a staged massive attack against the Great Swamp Fort owned by the Narragansetts, where they totally destroying the settlement and killing and displacing hundreds of non-combatant women and children, known as the King Philip's War, right? Then 1913, for those who have not seen my video about the bad man, this date, December 19th, 1913, you had Jack and Jim Johnson, who fought each other in 10 rounds, came to a draw. It was the first time in the history that two black men fought for the title. So, as we're about to get into this, stay tuned as we get into this show.
Portions of the following program may be unsuitable for younger or more sensitive viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
Disclaimer. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowances made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news, reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Non-profit education or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. This video was made for entertainment purposes and is transformative in nature. Hey, how's y'all doing, everybody? Again, this is your host, the most hated show in the black corner of YouTube. This is Mr. Blow Your Minds, and welcome to We Up Report. First and foremost, I want to say what's good to my fam. She happen to be in the house, my day ones, the original day ones. Black Beauty is always in the house. Good to see you here. Glad to see you still around. Yes, I know I ain't been around, but it takes some time for me to do what I got to do, but I appreciate each and every one of you who come over here. New subscribers who happen to catch the live afterwards, the replay, welcome to the We Up Report family. Passerby, you happen to pass by, this is the most hated show in the black corner of YouTube. Happen to go down the aisle, happen to see something to make you feel some kind of way. Remember, the motto of my show is the truth. Don't need no partner. Now, today's show is going to be on the topic that I'm doing called the hidden attitude towards reparations. Let me say that one more again. Today's show, being December 19, 2021, is going to be on the hidden attitude towards reparations. Also in it, we're going to talk about, for those who may not heard about, a town in Georgia called Linnentown, where back in the 50s, a black family was displaced due to, as you're going to learn in the story, if you didn't already know, and give you my spin on it as well. We're going to talk about a poll that came out by the Brookings Institute that did a poll, and it talked about white America and their attitude about reparations. Then we're going to talk about the correlation through line of that and how you ever heard of 1526? A lot of people don't know. Everybody hear about 1619, but many people don't know about 1526. 1526, and then we're going to look at something that came out about it, but we're going to look inside of that 1526 and the two aspects of it, and we as Black Americans in this country, how does that tie in with us? And then we're going to find out as an Americans and when they talk about Aboriginals. So stay tuned as we finna get into that, and I thank each and every one of you for being here. And let me go ahead and let me start off the show with this and be right back.
Righting the wrongs of history, Georgia is now paying reparations 70 years after a federal program took land from Black homeowners to build freeways and universities. About 40 families of color here in Las Vegas were impacted. Matt Pearl shows us the consequences of the federal program and what's being done to fix it in our Two Americas segment.
Athens, Georgia hardly exists without the University of Georgia. The largest school in the state holds nearly 40,000 students. It is an institution. Around town are reminders of what institutions can bring and what they can take.
Cannot come by here without associating what could have been.
Patty Whitehead and Bobby Crook.
See, this was a hill.
Grew up where 3 dorms now stand.
This is a picture that was taken in 1947.
They knew it as Linnentown.
Linnentown was a small Black community. Adults worked hard and they reached 66% home ownership. Community felt safe. The whole city didn't feel safe, but the community, you felt safe.
It was. But in the early 60s, the university and the city marked Linnentown for urban renewal. They used eminent domain to make space for new dorms and move families out.
Taking property, particularly targeting Black communities. It means that they want the land and they want it cheap. So this is a way that you can get it cheap, all under the name of the law.
In the 50s and 60s, the federal government gave more than $13 billion for urban renewal projects. Those projects moved out hundreds of thousands of people, largely people of color, in all but 7 states. Institutions wielded power and served some above others.
I'm not just reporting on this city and this university. I was a student here, a graduate student in the journalism school, a school named for an old newspaper editor that once declared the white race was superior. How would you rate race relations in Athens, Georgia today?
I think they're mixed.
Mayor Kelly Gertz presides over a city where nearly 3 in every 10 residents are Black. Among students at UGA, it's fewer than 1 in 10.
The Board of Regents has been named by the last 3 conservative governors of the state. I think there are times when they've not wanted to touch these issues with a 10-foot pole.
But it's not just campus. It's the lack of affordable housing. It's the bar downtown called General's that until last year was named for a Confederate general. It's the first site off the highway being the Plantation Buffet. It's the tensions in the institutions that bubble under cities and towns across America.
This is my home. This is my blood, sweat, and tears. It's as though we have been left behind. And I say we, I mean Black people.
In terms of census tracts and demographics, I mean, it's evident that Black Athenians have long held per capita far less wealth than white Athenians. That's just a fact. And I've got to be conscious of that and ask how we move the meter on that. Apology is a strength.
This past February, the city passed a resolution to honor Linnentown and commit to reparations for its descendants. The first act of reparations in the state.
And to all Athenians, a deep and sincere expression of apology and regret.
People told me they thought that would never happen. But when it happened, and we put this program together for him to read it, it just brought me to tears. Like, finally, we got an apology.
There are many hurdles. It's unclear how much the community will receive. The Georgia Constitution prevents giving state and local dollars directly to third parties, and the university has declined to participate in the Linnentown project or approve any markers of recognition on campus property. The tension persists, born of history, sustained by lack of trust. And yet,
you emerge from this whole thing with hope.
Yes. And faith has been recognized in a small way. So it makes a difference.
In Athens, Georgia, I'm Matt Pearl.
All right, so that was the video that is about the Georgia community that was seized, controlled to make a way for the University of Georgia, right? So there was an article, as you see on your screen, all hopes was lost, a sustainable Georgia community seized, destroyed to make way for University of Georgia's dorm. Now descendants are demanding reparations. Let me say that one more again. All hope was lost. A sustainable black Georgia community seized, destroyed to make way for University of Georgia dorms. Now descendants are demanding reparations. Now this story came out in December 7th. And as you've seen in the video there, it talks about how this article that I'm about to lay out for you to coincide with what you already seen on the video is talking about how eminent domain, 40 families. Even this article talk about 50 families. And the money of $13 billion that displaced, which is going to be an entire program of 300,000 people countrywide, and majority of those are going to be black families. Now you might be asking, well, Mr. Blow Your Mind, why would you be talking about this? We understand about reparations, and we heard about Oklahoma City, and we done heard, right? We done heard about certain towns, but we haven't heard all of them, right? So this one in particular, for those who are avid watchers of my show, what I do is do reports, things I think of some importance that we should be knowing as family. So again, this goes back to the 50s and the 60s. This place, those who were in Athens, Georgia at the time, and specifically in a town or a community named Linnentown. Now, as you've seen in the video, you've seen the sister there, and I'll talk a little bit more about her. But it was her family and others who are seeking reparations and want to testify before Congress. Okay? And based on what their families have endured, what the separation has caused them, loss of property, loss of a community, Hattie Thomas Whitehead is the sister's name that you've seen in the video. And they're laying out the fact that what they had destroyed with their family and a lot more because of the possibilities of having generational wealth, and how their parents and them losing the fact that they became homeowners did not be inheritable to the further next generation. Now, there's many of young people out here, there's people who are not articulating why the conditions that many of us are in. A lot of people will say this is an excuse. They don't subscribe to excuses, and that these things are just part of obstacles that you have to keep maintaining and fighting through. I don't disagree with it, but that doesn't mean that this is not real. It's not tangible. It doesn't have the cause and effects that has permeated our people. And when stories like these come out, I think it's our job as those who are of the black media in the black corner of YouTube, that we relay these information so that the newer generations have heard from our perspective, let alone that the general media gets to tell its part, right? So this Linnentown existed in the height of what they call about the Jim Crow era. Okay? And you heard in the video where she associated of what could have been, right? The outlook of what would have had happened if they would have been able to thrive in that community and continue to extend, pass down general wealth, and the prosperities that could have had been. But it looks like that this small community was surrounded by the elements of the Jim Crow era. And so even though they are surrounded and immersed in a population or segment of town, that they didn't feel that outside of their community, there was, as she said, they felt safe. And this particular part I want to talk about a little later is because I've seen little brothers and sisters who are acquisitioning, well, I don't even want to use the word acquisition, but I'll talk about that word later on. But they have garnered land that they now purchase as groups, and I'll talk about it as I get more into it, but make that a checkpoint of mine that I will return to that point. And so what we see is they had businesses, as she talks about, that there was 60% of the residents who lived in this community, they owned their own land. Let me say that again. In this town or this community called Linnentown, where it was a thriving black community that had businesses and owners of land, 60% of them in this place. Okay? And what's going to happen is, it's what normally happens. I mean, we always keep reiterating about Oklahoma City, Rosewood, and things like that. And then now we see a new crop of generations who are now feeling that this is what they need to do, but always be these as a reminder of history, so that everything that you're planning, do not forget about the people that preceded you and what took place. So whatever measures you need for safety, and how do you really protect yourself. When you look at this story here, you remember it talked about in the beginning of that video that this town of Linnentown, or this community called Linnentown, was marked for eminent domain, right? Marked for. So when you talk about marked, right, that means somebody had the intent, they had their reason, they had their purpose. So according to what you heard Hattie said, that this was a way for them to get land for cheap, right? And so let's look at this. Let's look at history as a reminder. It doesn't mean we have to dwell in the past. It doesn't mean that we soak and cry about it. But these are the indicators that if we're going to use the past as a way to build upon, do not forget about these particular things, because again, there's some young brothers and sisters who are doing work, trying to do some things that I will show you, and we'll move forward in that. But you see that they end up seizing this town, came Linnentown no more. They took the area and built dorms, right? And this was part of the University of Georgia. Now, how they did this, they was under the federal government urban renewal program, okay? And I'll talk a little bit more about how this urban renewal program and some of the things that it did. But cities and colleges, based on this urban renewal program, were empowered to seize property and what they would call a slum clearance. Let me say that again. You would have a town name or a community called Linnentown in Athens, Georgia, became seized by the federal government to give to the University of Georgia to create dorms under a program called Urban Renewal, where it empowered them to seize their property under what they would call a slum clearance. Now, slum clearance just means really an eviction, removal, a so-called transform the low-income settlements with poor reputation into developments of housing. Let me say that again. Slum clearance is just another way to say to be evicted, a removal. So-called transformed low-income settlements with poor reputation into developments of housing. Now, think about that, family. Some of us live in areas that have a bad reputation, been stigmatized by, again, elements that are outside of us that do come from some of our family members who are creating the sensation that the general media uses to make these areas like that. And then as time go on and when the city do planning, we see rejustification happen. And the reason is because they hide under titles like urban renewal, okay? Slum clearance. If you look at the Housing Act of 1937, you know, a lot of us don't understand how we got it to housing, public housing. Well, that's because during the times of this urban renewal program, a lot of our people, according to what we've seen in this particular video, it talks about 300,000 people were displaced throughout the country, and the majority of those people were, once again, we know who they were, right? Black Americans. And so being displaced, end up with this program, paired it with public housing, creating assistance programs for what they call displaced communities. This is the beginning of how a lot of us, or some of our people, got into these public housing, get into what these programs, due to what had happened with this urban renewal. Okay? And so you see the university and the city government at the time, they used the word, as I said earlier, that I want to talk about. They talked about requisitioned lots. The word requisition, we're going to talk about the word requisition, right? They requisition lots, burn homes to the ground. Okay? So let's look at, they talk about settlements. When you talk about a settlement, that is basically like saying falling or the foul or the foreign matters to the bottom. You know, like when you talk about, let's say, sediments in the bottom, when you have some, you stir something up and all that's at the top will eventually fall to the bottom. And so that these are the things that subsides, let's say leaves, dredge that is not used. These are the areas they call that we lived in, settlements, right? Given possession by legal sanctions. Those areas that we came out of, most of us we came out of, these areas were what? Legal sanctions. Again, who was the one creating, allowing this to happen? The federal government's urban renewal program. So these areas were created originally, and then later on they're going to be used to justify how to get rid of you. Okay? Again, we talk about settlements, as good as the law can make. So the areas we lived in, as good as the law will provide them the bare minimum to keep you function. Matter of fact, you remember in the movie Harlem Nights, you remember when Bill Canton sent his right-hand man to go to Sugar Man's house, right? Which was Richard Pryor. Remember, Richard Pryor came in and he was sitting in his chair. And they had the dialogue back and forth talking about whether that he was the man he was looking for. Then it comes again after that time, and then it's when he had Eddie Murphy with him. And they have the dialogue once again. And then he talks about how he gave them the proposition of what they wanted versus what they were going to give them, which basically they were robbing them, right? So if you go back, you remember how that went down. What you see is, remember he said, if it was up to him, I would give you jigs just enough to function. But Bugsy is more nice than I am. Remember he said that? I'll give you jigs just enough to function. Well, when you talk about people being in settlements, as good as law can make is the bare minimum, which keeps them within the law that they have to do, but they're going to give you the bare minimum and wonder why the areas that you live in, and then people will sit there and say that you run these areas down when primarily these areas that you lived in that you did not own were owned by other people who, based on how real estate goes, have been marked and labeled as slums. So why would you invest a lot of money in an area that no matter how much money you put into the property value doesn't go up? So what happens? Things get ran down. And so what they do is they put the stigmatization on that you run it down. Now, I'm not saying that none of our people didn't, be destructing the property, made some of the conditions a little inhabitable. But that's only because, again, taxes are not being allocated because they're being taken out because of those people who do own and just being slumlords. But they put all that stigmatization on us, right? And another word, when you also look at settlement, you also talk about establishing as a colony, right? Colony, okay? So that's what was happening here. And so when they talk about requisitions, they're just saying that the University of Georgia put in the application, made it as the right, that we have the right, that this territory that we see that they have, regardless of what's going on over here, we demand, we have the right. Matter of fact, under the old Confederation of the American States, they were able to use that to requisition these lands and to take the lots and to burn homes that they deem uninhabitable. And that's what they're fighting. That's what they're trying to go before the courts, and they want to fight for that, right? And when you think about the University of Georgia, it was the first state-supported university in the United States. Let me say that again. The University of Georgia was the first state-supported university in the United States. So basically, state-supported is not private, meaning it's a public university, okay? Being public. And so they, as you heard in the video, when she tried to say, well, they're taking this land for cheap. The person who you seen in there talking about, he himself has gone to this university, and some of the people who they given, a section of the university and named it was a person who declared that white race as superior, right? We don't deny it. We don't not understand that. We get that, right? And so as you heard her more go into this, and I will talk a little bit more, but you see that she herself has created an organization. It's the Linnen Projects. And what they're trying to do is, like I said, they're trying to go before, and with their families, they want to be reparated, and they have some demands. So here's some of the demands that they talked about, the Linnen Project's list of demands. Hey, you sitting here watching the video. Why you sitting there? Put your hand on that like button, click it, thumbs it up, share this video, comment. You can like or dislike it. We don't care about that. And also, if you ain't over here and subscribe, what you waiting on? Get yourself on there and subscribe to get on up to We Up Report so you can stay up because we're going to keep you up. That's how you help keep this channel going. You can also do some monetary donations. We'll tell you about that later. But right now, wake yourself up, like, share, and comment. And don't forget, when you subscribe on that button, hit that put all notifications. You know how YouTube get down. They want an official acknowledgement of recognizing the existence of Linnentown, accepting the responsibilities for the injustices. But guess what? The University of Georgia said it didn't want to hear nothing about it. It's not going to recognize it, right? Isn't that, just downright what it is, right? Matter of fact, when you think about Georgia, isn't that where a lot of that $5 Indians was taking place when they started to come there, I guess, fill out applications to be determined or recognized and becoming $5 Indians? Wasn't it in Georgia, right? And there's a history of Georgia, but we'll go into that later on, and I'll do more about this. But, you heard her say, right, that all she wanted was an apology from them, right? And I'm going to show you as we go more into this show here that just trying to get somebody to recognize an apology, even when it comes to the fact of, let's say, making a memorial or commemoration, you're going to find out that through polls, what the pulse of this country is. Okay? So she wants them to do things like that, to give acknowledgement of that. They're also talking about they want a memorial called the Wall of Recognition. They also want participatory budgeting powers, enabling Linnentown Justice and Memorial Committee to make recommendations for allocations in the city's budget for economic development, the infrastructure support of local impoverished communities. They want to have some input. They want to have some say. What y'all think was going to happen, right? How long are they going to drag their feet? You think they're ever going to really deal that, right? They also want a local center on slavery, race, and racial justice, co-founded by the University System of Georgia. They want them to fund it. They want them to co-fund, if not pay for, or at least co-fund. Georgia, like, we ain't trying to hear none of that. See? Because why? Nothing they did was not, according to them, illegal. Right? There was no illegalness. It was all legal. And somebody said that if we want to talk about reparations, remember those who've seen that show I did where Larry Elder talked about, well, what about those who lost their property? And the property being us, right? And he felt like, well, they should get paid because they lost their property. Now, again, like I said last time, what type is that? Anyway, moving on. They also want to create the authority to determine the appropriate forms of reparation for black communities harmed by slavery and Jim Crow segregation, urban renewal across the state of Georgia, right? So they're trying to use this situation to actually open the door for other situations that was in the entirety of the state of Georgia. And that's kind of being on code in a way that it's not solely about just what happened to us, but as a family and all that they're trying to encompass by opening that door. Now, how much success will they have? Well, as you see in this story here, they're trying to demand reparations under what reparations is about property and businesses. They seem to fall under that, but we see how things are working and going in this country. So I also want to talk about and show you, as I said, these young brothers and sisters who are now purchasing and acquiring land. So check this video out, and I'll come back after that.
We are the buying power. If we can just teach each other to circulate our dollars within the community, we will solve our own problems. We are literally the answer to our own problems, but we have to change our thinking and come together.
Okay. This video here, this part here is, I think, a young brother named Brother Ben X, and there's those out there doing what they're doing. Like I said earlier in the video, there's young people out here who are trying to do things by acquisition of land, putting communities and families out there. But as this story talks about, y'all, eminent domain. How do we as Black Americans protect our property when they have a break the glass case of emergency by using eminent domain? We've seen these stories over history and how they keep on telling the same thing, basically doing it once again. So anytime when you see brothers and sisters out here who are younger doing this, the history has to be told. They have to remember, and how do one protect themselves in this situation? As you see happening in Linnentown, right? That's the Hereafter program. And the first one was they were actually in Georgia. Those, I think it's called the Georgia Initiative Program. And they acquired a 97 acres. I think Brother Ben X did 100 acres. And there's other young ones out here doing the same thing. So my thing is, we can't forget about our history as to what then entailed. And just because we're doing it, also, especially at this particular time, how do you play the game and still not get caught by the game is what I'm really saying. So just want some food for thought for those who may know about them and so forth, and others, and the history, because what we do over here, WeUpReport, we take the news, we bring the history, and we try to connect the dots. For those who don't know and those who do know, well, we always have a forum for you to come where we open it up and you can come in and give your parts. So the next part I want to show you here is based on a poll that came out recently by the Brookings Institute. So I'm going to go ahead and let's get into this Brookings report. All right, so we're going to go into the next topic of this show. As you see on your screen, it says, How We Repair It. White Americans' Attitude Towards Reparations. Let me say that again. How we repair it. White Americans' attitude towards reparations. Now, this story is coming out of Brookings News, or Brookings Report. It was done December the 8th, 2021. And in this article, it's going to talk about how the United States has used reparations, what they say, they targeted initiatives intended to concretely repair a harm against, now, this is what you got to watch now, against A natives, okay? A natives, okay? A natives are specific natives. That does not mean the entirety of the natives, right? A native with S, right? Those natives, meaning these specific natives, but that doesn't mean the entirety. Now, you must stay to the end, and you understand what I mean by them saying what they said in this article, where they say target initiatives intended to concretely repair harm against A natives, okay? Now, this is what they were talking about in this article. But they said, however, the descendants of Africans enslaved on U.S. soil have been notably absent from this history of reparative actions. One more again. The descendants of Africans enslaved on U.S. soil have been notably absent from this history of reparative action or reparative actions. Now, descendants of Africans, many will have a problem with that. And when they say that, who are they really speaking to? Who are they talking about? So I'm going to get into some specifics as we get more into this. Now, this is what had came out in this article. Now, they talk about while the task of reparation seems daunting. Right? Think about that word daunting. When somebody says daunting, what do they mean? What do they mean that the task of reparation seems daunting? Well, daunting means be afraid of, fear, doubt, to intimidate. But the main part that is tame. Let me say that again. The daunting, while the task of reparation seems daunting in this sense, be afraid of, fear, doubt, to intimidate, tame. So there's a fear in really trying to reparate this wrong. They're scared really to reparate this wrong. And to say tame. Think about that, tame. Right? Means we've broken you from what you've been doing, and now it's been corrected and you can be right. Somebody is apprehensive of this. So now let me show you some more about this article. Let me show this here, right? Now it says, many Americans. Now, what is an American? What really is an American? Is are we all Americans? Because we all reside, have been birthed on, and then we're going to get into who's really the American and who has, say these days they always say, what's that word they use? When they say when people are stealing your stuff, they call it, it's slipping my mind right now. What's that term they use? Culture vulture, right? So somebody's going to culture vulture this, but stay tuned. So many Americans, considering the scale of injustice presented by slavery and its aftermath, they say they believe this is a conversation the country needs to have. Are we behind? Are we beyond? Is it past due? Very past due? Disconnection? No more service? When you talk about conversation, we're beyond conversation. Am I right? All right. Now, according, they also had said this, and let me let you see this, right? Says, it's because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we stepped into and how we repair it. Man, the Gorman, the hill we climb. Okay? Now, in this statement, being American. Now, a lot of people are coming from other places and denouncing where they come from, and to now take on the American as now their new title. I don't know, according to what we finna find out, are you really the American? But we know the game that's been played and what people are using for, but you believe this to be you. So the American pride, and then to say that those who have now put on this new American cape, new suit, the whole pursuit of being an American, you now inherit. What have you inherit? Because you say the past we step into. Oh, the past is now still in the present. Okay? So you have to recognize that what the past has done and what we are presently today, and that you have inherited, and you believe you need to repair it. Right? That's what this person here said. But I'm going to go on more as to what they said, and I keep that in mind. They probably call themselves repairing this. But let's look at what happens when they go ahead and do this poll. Now, they said they did a recent polling, and the data of the documents of American general opposition to reparations in the form of financial payments to Black Americans. Let me say that again. Recent polling. Data documents Americans' general opposition to reparation in the form of financial payments to Black Americans as compensation for slavery. Okay? There's a general opposition. And it's in the form of financial payments. Why is that? Why, if you're going to recognize what had took place and the injustices and what has been the burden that Black Americans and allow other people who have cloaked on and now take on the moniker of being American. Now, when you have the opportunity, as that person said, that Amanda said, you inherited, you stepped into, now, when it comes to asking you the question and trying to put it on the table, watch how and see how what the poll showed. So they showed in 2014, it said 68% of those polled opposed such payments, while it said only 15% supported and 17% were unsure. That's what they say. In 2014, 68% of the people who were polled. They don't tell you how many people were polled, but according to this poll, the percentages was 68. So as the readers, when we read this, we have to take it that this represents percentage-wise the American people, right? That's what we're gonna. That's why else would you make a report and show this? Just in case you think that I made this up, just in case. Let me let you see it. Again, recent polling data documents American general opposition to reparation in the form of financial payments to Black Americans as compensation for slavery. In 2014, 68% of those polled opposed such payments, while only 15% supported them. 17% were unsure, right? You see it right there on your screen. So you know I didn't make that up, right? Now this is the article that they put out there, again, December 8th of 2021. I didn't see nobody really touch it. There was other people talking about reparation, but they didn't get into the specifics of that one. Then they said they did a more recent. Now, originally they do 2014, then they go into 2020, and then 21. I don't know why you did a year. We don't know. The one between 2014, I actually had the video of that, but you cannot no longer now find that. So now it's only going to come in writing where they actually did the report, and I used to have that. I think I got it in my archives. I might have to find it. But anyway, so they did a most recent poll and still suggest generally comparable results, right? What was done in 2014 is almost in sync of what it was in 2020. Now, according to the results, they said in 2020 was 63% of those who were polled opposed again to cash payments, while they said 31% supported. 6% had no opinion. Now, again, they're saying white. Now, in our minds, we think that white people in this particular country, as the United States, is only people whose pigmentation is white people, people who are only European. But we come to find out when we learned about census and we're talking about boxes and other people of other persuasions that possibly at one time might have been considered Black, Negro, colored, right? are now in the white box. So when we look at statistics like this, and when they say white Americans, that don't necessarily only mean that white American person that you see. That could be other who are now in the category of being white. So somebody has said, John Henry Clark said, we have no friends, right? We have no friends when it comes to getting the cut of the pie. When people are checking box to be in this category that is beneficial, right? There's privilege that comes with it. There's also the fact of a lot of other benefits that come with that, right? So again, then they talk about a year later in 2021, they said that again, 62% opposed. Now wait a minute. In 2020, it was 63. In 2021, it went down 1%. Okay, so let's just look at it like this, and they talk about 38% supported. So the support is going up about 7%, right? So let's go back to 2014 when they said, how many was it originally in 2014? They said in 2014 it was 68%. So 7 years later in 2021, it moves down to 63%. That's 5%. In 7 years. So how long, if we was to do it at this juncture of counting, how long would it take to get that to at least 50% of those who will be opposition? Damn near 2050. Am I right? Damn near 2050 where you get before you get to at least 50%. We are 2021. Can black folks in America, Black Americans in particular, can we wait another 29 years for them to finally be divided as to what it is? And that won't even get us over the threshold. That will only get you at 50% of them. You know, it'd be, what was that, 50-50? You still need 51-50, right? Okay, so that means even at 2049, in order to get that another 1%, it would still take some. If the country is still at this position of mind. So they say that the indication that this robust opposition remains despite a growing awareness of the contemporary racial inequalities, suggesting strongly that the racial awakening alone may not substantially alter policy's view. Okay? They went in there and they did a poll. They actually did a graph, and I'm going to show you this graph. And in that graph, what they show is, again, the percentages of people who are in favor, opposed, and neither favor nor opposed. Now, when it came to those who are just opposing, right, again, they're asking in the form of financial payment, right? In the form of financial payment. Repairing and financial. Well, let me show you according to what they show. Now remember, this article just came out on the 8th, December 8th. Okay? Now I'm not sure whether you can see there may be a little blur for you, but let me tell you what it shows on here. Now it says white Americans for memorial as a concept, 51% favor, 30% opposed, 17% as they show on there, neither favor nor oppose. Now, wait a minute. You talking about a concept. Well, a concept, memorial concept. A concept. That's it. This a concept? Okay. They're willing. You already got 51% that's cool with, oh yeah, we don't have a problem having a concept of a memorial. A concept. All right. Memorial on the National Mall, like they did with Dr. Martin Luther King. Gave us a statue, or gave a statue, and put it on the Washington National Mall as some kind of reconciliation for what was found to be 70-80% involved in the assassination, right? So according to what you see on your screen, you see that 46% of those who were polled were only in favor. 33 was in opposition to it, and 19. They don't even want to give you nothing in the National Mall. You know what I'm saying? Now, let's go to the next one. The next one is apology. They show 39% in favor, don't want to even apologize. But yet many will say, my people didn't do this to you, right? My family didn't own slaves. So if you are not a part of that, then why is this number so low when people are being polled to ask, would you like the pastor just like make an apology to them? 39% of the people that were polled said, hell no, right? And those who were just flat out, we ain't apologizing it was legal. You know how they think, right? So 45%. So 45 to 39%. Right? Did I say that right? 39% said, yes, let's apologize. 45% said, we ain't finna apologize. And 15 was like, neither way, right? So basically that 15, that neither way is basically like saying no too, right? What they said, let your yes mean yes and your no mean no. Anything in between is the devil. So we're going to put you on the 45% side, which is going to make that 60 to 39, right? Now, when it came to financial payments, look at this. 19% was in favor, 67% was like, no. Because you know why? And I'm not putting it all on him. But everybody got this thing to say, well, if you give black people their money, all they're going to do is spend it and give it back. Well, God damn it, what you think doesn't happen over all this damn time? We ain't got no factories, no distribution companies. We don't got no farm. Well, we have so many farmers, but you see how they find it doing, right? So we don't have a corner market to be able to say, okay, if we had our money, we can only spend it with ourselves. And nobody don't want that any damn way. But that is an excuse. And I think, I don't know, once again, whether Dave Chappelle wrote that joke or somebody wrote that joke for him, but I think that joke in itself has did some damage. I believe that joke did some damage because it's kind of like give you something so that they have a reason to say no. When you go to work and work your ass off for 2 weeks, or if you get paid weekly, when you get your check, is your check predicated on what you tell your boss what you gonna do with the money? Can your boss be like, well, what you gonna spend this money on? And he doesn't like what you gonna spend the money on? Well, I'm not paying you. But motherfucker, I already done worked already. What the hell you mean you not paying me? Right? That's basically what that is. I don't want to pay you because I don't think you're gonna do right by the money. Or maybe I might do right with the money and you still don't want that. We'll see. Let's move on with this, right? Let's move down a little bit more because again, this came out, nobody touched it, but we did it anyway. So they talk about the support for reparation differs strongly across the ethno-racial lines in the United States. That in 2014, the poll of 79% of white Americans opposed cash payments. Now that 14 polled was 79%. Now wait a minute. I thought when I really did that, it said 60. Wait a minute, didn't it say? I mean, didn't they say originally, when I originally said that in 2014, they said that it was how on? 68. So now they come back and they telling a lie. Now they say 79. So you done caught with your pants down. Let me show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to show you it. So they said, again, 2014, 79% of white Americans opposed cash payments as a form of reparation. 6% supported, 15% were unsure. The unsure ain't no different than the 79 that was opposed. Put that together, 79 to 15, that's about 94%, right? Okay. Then they said, in contrast to that, 19% of black Americans was opposed. Now, there's 19% of black people back in 2014 who was just like the white folks of 80% who were like, black folks, well, what is that? Your elite? Is them the ones who already got money? Is that like Herschel Walker talking about, I already got money, they don't need nothing? We ain't, you know what I'm saying? We pull our own self by a bootstrap. What the hell does that got to do with what happened to us entirely? Not just our ancestors, but this has been a continuation of this ordeal this whole damn time, right? So they said the contrast of 19 black Americans were opposed, but there was 59% who supported it. We've always been there in that 60% that supported, because why? Majority of our group are in not the elite, not the well-to-do, middle poor, right? Is the big crux of the numbers, right? And as time went from 2014 to now, guess what done happened? A lot of them people who thought they was in that position, that they was good, they thought that, you know what I'm saying? But that money, that side done changed. But let me show you as it goes, right? And then they said there was about 22% of us who were unsure, right? So what happens is the 19% of those who went straight opposition, again, the 22 is just like being part of that. So that was like, what, 41% to 59. So then when they did the poll in 2021, they found that there was a 7% drop of 72% of white Americans opposed to this form of reparations. 28% supported it, right? While only 14% of black Americans did opposition, which means 5% people who were once on that 19% in 2014 somehow now will come on the other side. Now, that don't necessarily mean it's the same people who didn't poll, but they're saying the demographics and the numbers of the polls have changed. Now more in the favor of towards reparation, as before, going back 7 years before, where it was 5% more, down to 14. And then the number of those who supported it went from 59 to 86, which is about that's about a 27% jump. So that means from the time of 2014 to 2021, let's just say from 2018 until now, the black corner has been doing this job, as they've been talking about reparations, making it more known, which means it also may be having this effect on white folks who realize that maybe you should be doing it. So there might be a slight change, but not enough of the change, right? So moving on with that and more, it goes on and it talks about, they said there was a commonly cited reason for white Americans' opposition to reparations. It includes the difficulty of determining the monetary value of the impact of slavery. Wait. For white Americans' opposition, the commonly cited reason, the reparations include the difficulty of determining the money value. Wait a minute. When you buy insurance, right? When you buy insurance, whether it be house, car, life, well, life might be a different because you know how much the policy gonna be worth, but what you're paying for, right? A car, is there a value of, depending on, I guess, what kind of coverage you got, right? But it would cover according to your coverage, right? So I guess that's where you say the difficulty of determining the impact of slavery alone. Well, the value of the impact, there's not enough money to really cover the monetary value, right? There's never going to be enough money to repay the lives, the atrocities of what that experience and has been prolonged and continues to do. There's never going to be a true monetary value. But that doesn't mean that because you can't put a pure price tag, that allowing some kind of concession to be, evaluated doesn't mean that you're going to prohibit the whole ordeal from it happening. And so that seemed like a way to try to, well, we can't determine what it is, so how are we going to be able to do this? Don't worry about that. We'll figure that out. No, you ain't got to worry about that, right? So they said the fact that no one directly involved in the practice of slavery is still living. Now, wait, again, always with the kickstand. Well, there's nobody today who's still living that was practice of slavery. Yeah? You know what Iverson said about practice? You want to talk about practice. Practice. What about all that game time? What about all them games that was being played before now? And you want to talk about nobody here is part of the practice. Well, guess what? You were still on the team. Whether you practice or not, you still on the team. You still getting the benefits. You still inherit the benefits. So again, everybody wants to claim that they had no ancestry, that ain't none of my descendants. But when it comes to asking you about doing what's right, everybody got some kind of kickstand way of trying to find a way to get around it. Don't want to be held accountable, right? So the others, they say, reasons centered around the denial of any ongoing legacy of slavery. The denial of any ongoing slavery. What do you, denial. What is it? Okay, because, I think this is what they're really trying to say. When they said 1865 and they said Lincoln emancipated, that was the end of it. It stopped. Have you ever seen a boulder at the top of a damn mountain roll down the damn mountain, and then as it gets closer to the ground and it's about to crush some damn people, it stops itself. It can stop on the whim because it don't want to run the damn people over. Or is the momentum of the boulder going to continue even after it run them people over? It going to keep on rolling until the force, the momentum dies. So just because 1865 was the so-called emancipation, which is all game, right? It's all game. So that boulder kept on rolling because you talking about 100 years later, you were only talking about civil rights. You're only talking about voting. So how long had that boulder been rolling for anybody to sit here and say the denial of any ongoing legacy? Black folks still been out here protesting, marching, trying to do activism to make some changes. And yet the people who benefited from all that have not been them. So who's in denial? Who's really in the denial? So the correspondent concerns about the undeserving nature of the prospective recipients of reparations. What? The correspondent concerned about the undeserving nature. Undeserving nature? What does that sound like? That just sounds like somebody who just being a straight out ass hater. All I do is pick up books. If you call yourself that you say you're American, but we're going to find out what really American is, and you read history, not the selected part, not the part that you want to go around and talk about how making a wedding on a plantation and reenact the Civil War, but everything in between that. Then what can you deny? Anything to not do what? Well, we'll see. So they said, given that white Americans gained the most from slavery, but they won't acknowledge that. They don't acknowledge that at all. And its compounded effects, the privilege that came with a system that was strictly designed. But not all of you gonna be in that. We all understand it. We know just because there's varying degrees in everything. There are the top echelon whites and there's the pot liquor whites. Now the pot liquor whites are the ones who are going to try to toe the line that said there has been no privilege, there's been no benefits. But that's not true. We can see just recently in a court case where a boy who, again, the way the media portrayed him, he was from the pot liquor people. He was just trying to work. When we come to find out, when we talking about going to school and all that, that was a damn lie. But anyway, moving forward, right? So a pot liquor got some privilege on a situation that if it had been of those of the descendants of, you're not getting none of that break. So even if you didn't have but $5 to your entirety of you and your people, you had $1 million worth of privilege so that you could get a raffle, you can get this dismissed, you can be vindicated. That's worth something. You get what I'm saying? That's worth something, because if you would have been of the other ilk, we don't think you could have walked out of there with nothing. Matter of fact, ain't no think. I ain't gonna tell you what I heard. I'm gonna tell you what I know. So, they said the process referred to as unjust enrichment. Unjust enrichment. Is that what this been? Unjust enrichment? The widespread opposition to reparation rooted in maintaining this advantage. See? Because, again, remember when I told you that the word meant tame? I'm talking about taming you, right? Isn't that what the daunting task of trying to pay is? Because there's a fear, a doubt, to be afraid of, to be tamed. If you did right, you'd be tamed. And then now there's the equaling, there's a rectifying of the past that now, whatever we done gained now, that we can now benefit. And now when I look at you and you look at me, then we don't got that. But the problem is I got what I got right now, and you're going to be in the position you're going to be in right now, especially if you're on the pot liquor side. And that's who don't want that, right? Let's keep it real. The pot liquor don't want it. It's the pot liquor. So anyway, so a research oriented towards better understanding of the source of white Americans' opposition. They go a long way towards helping us comprehend public opinion on reparations while shedding light on possible progressive paths forwards. Will there ever be anything that you could tell a people, like again, not everyone of whiteness is of the the benefactors of the gain. But again, your whiteness gives you $1 million access because of your skin. There's certain things you can benefit even though you're getting the low end of the spectrum, but you have the ability to gain it. While other people just on that premise alone cannot get in. So just because you don't look at that as a privilege in a country that's built on privilege, because people come from other places around the world who get to come in and check the box that did not apply where they came from, but they come here, all of a sudden now they in a scale that is above being these of us, of being Black Americans, of the descendants of this country. I ain't gonna say slaves. I'm gonna show you something as we go on. But they're talking about the recent work contributes that by examining how whites' level of opposition vary across different types of reparations. How white attitude towards reparations are structured by social demographics and social psychological factors. All that sounds to me is time. Just dragging it out more, right? Just dragging. It's just somebody who's just giving you the rigmarole. Running game. Oh man, I get paid next week. Catch him next week. Oh man, you know what I'm saying? Something happened. Okay, catch me on my next check. Let me get my income tax. You know what I'm saying? I'm about to get this money. You know what I'm saying? And after a while, you just like, man, look, quit playing with me. You get it? Quit playing with me. But anyway. But it said the type of reparations we examine range from purely symbolic. Of course it's symbolic. Nah, that's all it is. It's just a little rhetoric, a little stirring the pot up, a little talk about it. But as an application, no, they ain't gonna do that. Look what the poll told you. When they even went to apology. You mean, what does apology cost you? To say you sorry? How much does it cost for a person to say they sorry? If you truly sorry. But if you ain't sorry, then ain't nothing to be apologized, right? Ain't no speech. We ain't got to make no speech. But obviously it pains so much to even say apology, a memorial. They would rather haggle on apology and a memorial and tell you flat out no when it comes to financial payments to Black Americans. What's the difference? If you tell me flat out no about reparations financial payment, and to be well, we slow about apologizing. It's the same. A no is a no. I don't care what language you say it in, right? A no is a no. No matter what language you speak in, it's going to always be no. So, you know, what they say in this article is that white Americans are most supportive of symbolic action. Huh? Symbolism. That don't cost you nothing. Just like the George Floyd statue, and they keep throwing paint on it. They keep destroying it. It was like giving the symbolic action of the Emmett Till Memorial where they keep shooting with bullets. You get what I'm saying? You give these memorials and then you show your disdain by destroying it, and they just keep putting it up and you just keep doing it. So you're just showing, according, just like the polls say, you're in opposition and you're slow at it, huh? Right? What they say, slow justice is no justice at all. Well, that's basically what it is. Sometimes some people want to prolong some things, hoping that something happened to you and then we never have to deal with you. Maybe that's what some of this, pouring these bowls out of these, can we say, these spirits that are being poured into the atmospheres. That's for another topic for another time. And so they most opposed to cash payments. If they supportive of symbolic action, which means they don't want it, they just want something that don't cost nothing and you really don't benefit from it. What does that tell about the individuals and the people who are like that? But you know, morals don't cost nothing either. Morals don't have no value to another people who, again, want to keep that so-called advantage. Morals, if I play the moral game, and then that's going to let me not have the advantage anymore. As they say back in the plantation, I'd rather be a nigger than a poor white man. So it's the one who's the poor white man who is the whole toe in the line that keeps this from going. Because they fear that he's going to be upset because now what you done, it took the so-called Negro and made him now above me. So it's like, what good is my whiteness? What good is it? So they found that the white Americans who are older, more conservative, but I be seeing these people talking about they black conservatives out here. I'm trying to figure out what you're trying to conserve. But you got white Americans who are older, more conservative, and who view race relations as unimportant. Right? They view race relations as unimportant. Why? We ain't trying to do nothing about it. Even those who call themselves black conservatives, look at their ideology and look how they talk about black people. So what would be any difference when you get the pure white one? Ain't gonna be no difference, right? And so they are most opposed to the change of reparation policies, right? They only opposed to the range of reparation policies. The range? If you do a person wrong, whatever it takes to rectify the situations, if you're really trying to do it, those things can be negotiated. But you can't put a tap on it and say, nah, everything else you try, I'm not trying to do that. Only this one thing, which is, well, we could do symbolic. Then you ain't really you're not trying to repair anything. You're really trying to hold on, like you say, conserving. Anyway. So the opposition to financial payments was also significantly shaped by gender. Now check this out. Listen how they're going to always make it seem about this particular part when it comes to them. They say that specifically women, persons with lower levels of education, and self-identified middle class members were particularly opposed to this proposed remedy. So they're saying, listen, sisters, they saying the white woman who is a low-level educated and self-identified middle class, them Karens, they're the ones who are opposed to it. Because the minute you get the check, just like in the Chappelle, right? Remember the scene where the sister was sitting there standing in line, fanning with money. Hide y'all money, y'all. Broke, huh? See, they already know. Look how sisters can do themselves up and they ain't got all that. What happens when you done now, you know, got your money, you're gonna get your business and stuff and all that stuff and become more independent? How you gonna look then? Is that what everybody's afraid of? If black folks ever get on their feet and don't have to do the things because of the destitute and despair that's they've been in, the muck and mire all this time, and then they finally can breathe and live, what would you see? Things you could not imagine. Things of the gloriness of the spirit of places that you would see would just blow your mind. And nobody wants their mind to be blown. Keep that shit 100. So the symbolic justice from the federal government will encounter the least resistance from the white majority. Symbolic justice from the federal government will encounter the least resistance. Oh, they ain't got a problem with symbolic justice. They got no problem with that. Regarding the latter, when they talk about redistributing economic resources, will encounter the most. Redistributing economic resources. Ain't that something? Don't try to, okay, if it's unbalanced to the way the resources have been allocated, now that you're going to redistribute it so that everybody get their fair share, you got a problem with that. You don't, am I missing something? Am I missing something? If you redistribute economics and make everybody of their group get their fair share, because everybody seemed to have been, what movie was that? Oh, Cool Hand, was it Cool Hand Luke? Everybody came with their spoon and they dipped in his plate. Everybody came, walked up to him and dipped in his plate and took a bite of his food. Well, that's how black Americans are. Everybody, when we get our plate, everybody walk by and take a scoop spoon and eat and keep on moving. But we say, ho, 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 ho. I ain't gonna, now everybody can't get the scoop no more. Now, you got a problem with that. Because I won't let you get what you've been taking from me no more. We Joe cornbread. Anyway, right? So they talk about regarding the latter, which is the latter being the redistribution of economic resources, right? Most firmly rooted among persons whose social status may feel particularly precarious in the area of rising inequality. What you mean by that? You know, they've been trying to talk about now this affirmative action and how that, again, statistically, I could show you, but I'll show in another show where Elon Musk is told once again, sounding an alarm about needing to have more babies. Now, the first person who told y'all about that, going back in 2014, April 1st, was me. It was I who put that video out here telling you that it was going to be the extinction, right? Not about nobody going out killing nobody. It was about them not having no babies. 7 years, 2014, just like when they did that poll, I put out April 1st, 2014, the extinction of, and here's Elon Musk still shouting and yelling this, right? And so the people feeling that now that their demographic numbers is dropping and they're getting smaller, and the so-called the browning of this America, which means that all those policies and the things that had been set for, again, for the disparity and the disenfranchising will now come to bite them in their ass. And because they're going to bite them in their ass, they said, you know, in the Mac, when the brother went out there and got that, the dude that was out there selling the drugs and threw him in the back of the car, and Hank and them seen him, he threw him in the back of the car and he started shooting at the ground. He said, if he keeps doing this, we'll be broke on our asses. Huh? I say it again. We'll be broke and on our asses. So that means that all the stuff that your ancestors did, that now that the system has come to try to make amends and to correct it, will now be the detriment to you, because now when affirmative action, when you are not the let's say you're not in the majority position, then what end up happening? You know you smaller, you still can't get in those free things because your ancestors left you that insurance policy to leave you in that position, and you don't want that. So they're gonna be what, y'all? They're gonna be a total opposition to that, right? Because they feel that there's gonna be a rise in inequality because you're gaining everything now. Well, damn, man, it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. When it was done to us, it was okay. Now that you may get a share of it, but I already know how this gonna go. I already know how this gonna go. You understand? And that's what everybody not understanding. So they say, how then can we foster a sense of shared grievance around the issue of racial injustice harming Black Americans? Because now they're going to be in the position of the way they used to be for them. But the problem is, the people won't treat you the same way. The problem is, you just won't be going in the spoon and plates anymore. Everybody going to make their own. And so now that you're getting smaller, how can you, be, as they say, circulating your economics, because you'll be the minority now. That means you probably have to go outside of your community to get certain things. And that'll cause problems. That means now your money, which means to create more poverty, and then you'll be these stores that always talk about us. So you understand, y'all, why it's the way it is? Now, stay tuned. We're gonna get into this. So that's what they say. I don't need to go, but see, the thing is here, they want to say, as they said earlier in this, they want to talk about how politicians and Congress, they need to go ahead and get this HR 40 going, and so they can go ahead and finally deal with the conversation. Again, this ain't about no conversation. You well past due on a conversation. This is all about either you gonna do it or you're not gonna do it. Ain't no need more speech. Ain't no more speech. No more talking. Right? Ain't no more talking. So if that's all you're gonna do is keep, trying to trick the dog, thinking that you got something in your hand, and then open your hand, ain't nothing in there, ain't nobody playing that game no more. And matter of fact, just on what done happened at this election, look like the Democrats gonna be in trouble anyway, because you done fooled those that should have knew from that time not to have deal with you. But now, when they come around this again, you're gonna have to come with something. You're gonna have to come up with something, or otherwise you can't win. And looks like they about to pull Hillary out their ass again. Well, check this out. Hey, you sitting here watching the video. Why you sitting there? Put your hand on that like button, click it, thumbs it up, share this video, comment. You can like or dislike it. We don't care about that. And also, if you ain't over here and subscribe, what you waiting on? Get yourself over there and subscribe to get on up to WeUpReport so you can stay up, because we going to keep you up. That's how you help keep this channel going. You can also do some monetary donations. We'll tell you about that later. But right now, wake yourself up, like, share, and comment. And don't forget, when you subscribe on that button, hit that put all notifications. You know how YouTube get down.
Reparations, the act of making amends. Why is it so controversial, and why are so many people calling for it now? To examine that, we have to go back in time. 1526, the Spanish bring 100 enslaved Africans to what is now the Carolinas and Georgia. They were the first known slaves on American soil. We know what happened next. For the next 350 years, Africans were enslaved, beaten, tortured, and killed. They built the White House, they fought in wars, their labor built the American economy. And then came the Civil War and freedom. Promises of 40 acres and later on a mule. They were free, sort of. There were black codes allowing black people to be arrested for things like being out at night or not working as a servant. And then there was Jim Crow, a set of laws that denied African Americans all sorts of rights. If you violated them, it could get you arrested or even killed. Then there were housing discrimination laws and a practice called redlining, where federal and local governments denied black people home loans. Since this country's beginnings, an incalculable number of black lives, homes, jobs, and wealth have been lost. So the question is, can it be repaid?
All right, so the fact that they talked about in the reparations, we see that by percentage-wise, even though it's a poll, but it's supposed to represent the entirety, that it is a slow progression to just getting to the mindset worthy enough to even try to fruition the petition, which is more of a demand for reparations, right? So let's look at the real reason behind the fact that maybe they don't want to give it. The common story in this country is about 1619, right? That in this history of this country is the so-called beginning of the story of the United States. But really it's not even the beginning of the United States. It's just the beginning of what they consider the 13 colonies. But let's look at this story in its entirety. Or at least let me give you the gist, just for those who are not familiar with it. But let's look at when they talk about the European discovery and the beginning of the slave trade. Now, they have a date that is different from the timestamp being of 1619. They actually predate that by a couple hundred years, according to what they say. Now, they start at 1441, and they say about through 1654. And they talk about Prince Henry of Portugal. Okay? They talk about the series of voyages and him exploring, going to the west coast of Africa, supposedly seeking gold that was to be only obtainable by those of the Muslim traders. Now, Henry is using this opportunity because there is also supposed to be a legend of Prester John, those who know the story of Prester John. And according to that legend, they say that Prester John is supposed to be in the eastern parts of the continent known today as Africa. And so Prince Henry is actually going to seek out Prester John, according to the legends that they talk about, as to allyship with Prester John, so that they, and to align with them so that they can go after the followers of Islam. That's what they say in history. So they talk about a historian, his name is Gomez Azurara, right? Could be Azura. He's supposed to be the keeper of the Portuguese archives. Now, according to, in 1453, supposedly this is when it is stated that he is in the quest for the gold, and let's say like this, in pursuit of the gold, they end up had a change of heart. And in this change of heart, they're supposed to be now seeking slaves to work the farms and plantations that's going to be in Portugal. Let me say that again. When we talk about Prince Henry of Portugal, and they talk about the legends of him making the series of voyages that is going to explore, trying to get into the west coast of Africa in quest of looking for gold. But according to the legend, the only people who could have who could obtain the gold would be those who were of the Muslim traders. Now, according, they're going to now seek out for the person, the Prester John, and try to have an allyship with Prester John, so that this ally will help them to now further and go after the followers of Islam. Okay? And that it was Gomez Azura, the so-called historian who is the keeper of the archives, wrote that in 1453 that this quest for gold ended up turning into them raiding slaves to work on the plantations that were in Portugal. Okay? And these first taking of these people, supposedly according to what they write, takes place in Mauritania. Now, in 1452, you have what they call the Dum Diversas by Pope Nicholas V. And this, what he states, is to conquer the Saracens, okay, and pagans. Saracens, okay. Now, you have to know your history. I would go more, but again, this is pertaining to what we're talking about today. I'm just trying to give you the gist of the history so that you have a better understanding where we're going to go and ending, because how does this tie in to what you're talking about, Mr. Brody, when you're talking about reparations? Be easy, just easy now. So, they quest the Saracens, they're in Mauritania, and then what they're going to do is they're going to extend this quest from 1493, and then now they're going to make this go into all justifications of the colonization of the Americas. Okay? Now, this is that story right before you get to 1500. Remember, they're starting in 1441. They supposedly are starting in quest for gold. They end up trying to use the patsy of trying to ally with Prester John, that eventually turns dead end of the quest for gold that's in them, going to turn into now slave laborers to now take them from Africa, west coast of Africa, and go back into Spain. Right? So I seen this article here. I'm going to show on my screen. And it talks about 1526, the mysteries of the first enslaved Africans and what became the United States. Let me say that one more again. 1526, the mysteries, first enslaved Africans and what became the United States. Now, many of us who know the story of 1619, they talk about the 20 and odd Negroes, right, as being the first encounter with the United States, establishing this so-called slave trade, right? But is that really true? Okay? Now, they are not the first enslaved, but they say Africans. Now, again, there might be some people who may hear me and hear the term Africans and become in some kind of way, but stay to the end of this and then you will know, according to what has been written, to who it may possibly be, and there ain't going to be no possibility. It is going to be who they are. Okay? So, these 20-odd Negroes are not the first enslaved Africans that is going to set foot, what they call it that particular time, the continental USA. Not even US, not even United States, just the continental, right? Congress of Continental, so forth, right? It's not the United States. Matter of fact, 1526 is going to be actually about 93 years earlier than what is told to many people, what many people recite as the specific time and date. Now, this does not say this is the actual, but this is a part of history that has been established, that as you see on your screen, the news article, and I think it was in the Wall Street that did this article. Okay? And so it talked about how the Spanish explorers brought 100 slaves to the areas that we know today as South Carolina and Georgia. Okay? And in this story, they're going to talk about how within the weeks of the arrival of them coming there, there was the revolt that is going to take place. Okay? So let me go ahead and give you this story here, right? So they talk about 1520. They said that nearly all of the indigenous people in the Spanish colony of Hispaniola were dead. Now, this is 1520. Okay? Now, you know they always talk about 1492, and if you know what Hispaniola is, Hispaniola would be what we call today Haiti and the Dominican, right? Dominican island, which when they were one, they were considered as Hispaniola, right? Now listen to how they talk about this. So in 1520, the indigenous people in the Spanish colony of Hispaniola. Now, just because it's a colony, and if you talk about Columbus coming in 1492 to 1520 is about 28 years. So you telling me that the indigenous people that were in Hispaniola, who now are becoming part of this Spanish colony, are all dead. But they didn't say all. Nearly. How much is nearly? Is nearly 5? Is nearly 100? Is nearly 1,000,000? Is, you know what I'm saying? What number is nearly? Okay? So we don't have the grand number of how many people there was in Hispaniola prior to the arrival of Columbus. And then we talk about this particular story here. We're going to talk about in 1520 that they want to establish that in Hispaniola they were nearly all dead. Okay? And so now what they want to establish is that enslaved Africans were brought into play to replace them, as they are now again in search of gold. Now wait a minute. Right? Remember how I told you originally when you talk about the establishment of the slave trade, when you're talking about Prince, what was his name? Prince, that was the Portugal, Prince Henry of Portugal, right? And how his quest was for gold, but he was trying to navigate around because according to where the gold was and who had, I guess, control of it, you had to be part of the Muslim religion, faith, and peoples. They were doing the gold trade. So what we see is that he's going to try to now, that's what I say Henry the Navigator is going to navigate around and try to find Presbyter John to use an allyship. It's going to help them to legitimize so that they now can go after the so-called Muslim followers. Now that's over there. But now you're saying over here in the Western Hemisphere, in Hispaniola, or what you're designating calling it, that now the same thing is happening once again in quest for gold. And so by 1520, you're now trying to bring in enslaved Africans, and now you're in quest for gold, because you say nearly the inhabitants in that short period of time have all been or are deceased. Nearly, but we don't know what that number nearly is. So they talk about a man named Lucas Vázquez de Ayllón. Lucas Vázquez de Ayllón, right? Became a government functionary in the colony, and he wanted to start a settlement of his own. So supposedly, according to the way they write this, that he got his permission from the King and Queen of Spain, which is what Ferdinand and Isabella, and they send scouts sailing to the east of this Hispaniola. What they say now is now the United States to find a good spot. Okay? So now, the scouts that go out are seeking for a good spot to get into the place that is going to be eventually considered called the United States. Now, they said, according to a person named Guy F. Cameron, who wrote as a historian and supposed to be an anthropologist, he said that the permission came with the specific instructions that they were to build friendly relationships with any indigenous people they encountered. Okay, say that again. According to what was written by a historian named Guy F. Cameron, he said that the permission that was given by the Queen of Spain was specific, and the instructions was that they were to build friendly relationships with any indigenous people they encounter. So that means there are people that's already established being there, and they have recognized that, right? So these scouts that they sent out returned with some details, and they talked about the details of what is we call today South Carolina and Georgia on the coastline there. And they said that according to what they wrote, that they had 70 indigenous people they had abducted and enslaved. Let me say that again. The scouts that he sent out went through the coastline in the areas of what they call South Carolina and Georgia. They abducted and enslaved 70 indigenous people. Now, remember the instructions that was given by King and Queen of Isabella to Ayan, that they was to make friends with them, to be on friendly terms with them. So Ayan was angry because kidnapping was not exactly a building block, right, of comity, they say, and friendship. So he did not order their immediate return, right? He didn't send them back to the king and queen, right? So now the 70 people that he brought from the areas of South Carolina and Georgia, they started to die, they say, of sorrow and hungry because they wouldn't eat. Okay? All right, let's pay attention to this. Now, they said one of those of the 70 that they captured, right? Now remember, there's the 70 that they're taking with them from the areas of Georgia and South Carolina. They're going to bring them back to Hispaniola, right? And according to what they write, they said they're starting to die. One of them of the 70, they said his name was Francisco. Francisco. Now they say Francisco survived, but they didn't tell you how many of the 70 that died. But they're going to say Francisco. Now let me ask you a question for those who are hearing me. What is the possibility of you coming from Spain, from Hispaniola, and then going to a place that obviously none of y'all know nothing about? These are all new explorations, and you come to a land, and the man, after you see 70 of the indigenous people, right? This one name is Francisco, right? Well, do you know that Francisco in Latin means free man? Now, what's the odds of that happening? Is Francisco an indigenous name? Is Francisco a Spanish Latin name? But an indigenous person who happens to be named Francisco doesn't raise any flags. So anyway, so they say, according to this story, that Francisco quickly picked up Spanish. Now, I don't know. I took 2 years of Spanish in high school, right? And even after the 2 years, I know some Spanish, but I'm not fluent, right? And I think, when you're in school, well, I know when you're in school, you're doing it to pass the grade. Sometimes again, the electives, you have to take a certain amount of what they call languages, right? Spanish, you can have French, and there's Latin, there's something over there, but no African, right? Ain't none of the mother languages only, right? But anyway, so you have to learn these languages, and so that he picked up quickly, because they don't state how much time has elapsed between the time they taken. Okay? So based on the fact that he picked up French or Spanish so quickly, and his name being Francisco, any of who know history, what was this cat that they picked up? If we're going to take this to be true, Francisco, and he can pick up Spanish quickly. So somehow El Alyan grew to like him. So what he did is he took him, and they go back to Spain. And they're going to go before the king and queen, right? And he's relaying what had happened about what his original instruction that was given to them, and how that didn't work, because those who we sent out did not stay to the instructions. They end up abducting and taking them. And here's one of the individuals who's going to be with, who was one of them, who can speak Spanish. And so he is now trying to again get a second request to go back and colonize. So now that he done taught Francisco, right? And so Francisco is now trying to tell the king and queen, according to what they write, that he's talking about how amazing the land of where he's from. And he starts telling them about the people that they call the Shakoris, and these are his people. And they say, well, he's embellishing the story quite a bit, is because he's trying to convince the Spanish to sail back to the areas of the Carolinas and Georgia so that he could get back home. And this is what they're writing here, right? What they're writing. So permission was granted. Elian and Francisco sail for Hispaniola. They don't go directly from Spain back to the Carolinas, Georgia area. They go back to Hispaniola. And so when they get back to Hispaniola, he's going to gather people and supplies for their settlement. Right? Earlier I told you what settlement was, right? Settlement is the areas which is a foreign matter of or things that fall down to the bottom will subside, right? So we're gonna get us an area over there in these lands over here. And so they say a few months, but a few months could be 2 months, a few months could be 4 months, a few months could be 8 months, but they say a few months later. Now they say in the early of June, okay? So they say June of 1526, he's taken 500 of the colonists that they have in Hispaniola, but does that necessarily mean that all the 500 that he's going to gather with him are not just Spanish people? But they are specifying that there was 100 enslaved, they say Africans, right? Because remember, they say when they get there, nearly all die. So now, is everybody, so what part is the slave trade coming into Hispaniola? Don't know. But they know they're going to take 100 enslaved Africans. They know for a fact. That's what they write. But how do we know they weren't part of them indigenous of the Hispaniola? We don't know. But we know what they're writing. So accordingly, they 500 colonists and 100 enslaved Africans, and they're going to pack up what they say is 3 ships. So June, you got July, August 9th, they say one of the ships had sank, losing a lot of their food, and rescued all the passengers. So they was low on the victuals. And so as they were on land, Francisco disappeared. Okay, he got the hell out of there. So accordingly, he's leaving the colonists with no way to communicate what they say their new neighbors. colonists settled further south, they say, between what they call the South Carolina PD River and Georgia Sapelo Island. They renamed it San Miguel de Guadalupe. And so what they did is now they're going to order the Africans to clear the land, build homes, and a church. Okay? Now, they said arrived too late in the season to plant crops. And now that the food supply had got destroyed because I guess all the ship that did sink was the one that had all the food, right? So the colonists began to starve. So talk about how by the time winter came, it was so unusually cold. Never had experienced such a cold before. And as it's cold like that, they said an unknown infectious disease spread through the settlement. Huh? I thought that it didn't spread when it got cold, just like we're seeing now. It's like, oh, it's heightened again. It's cold. It don't matter. I thought it didn't. Well, anyway, for another show. So here it is, infectious disease. They're starving to death. So they decided to go seek some help from the indigenous neighbors. And no, that didn't work because they started killing them. Within a few months, they said 350 of the 500 settlers had died. Whether it was by them killing them, either because they starved to death or the disease killed them. So if you got 350 died from 500, that leaves you with how much? 150 left? Okay? But they want to say that it was unknown how many of the enslaved people perished. Why would they have perished? Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But you know 350 of the settlers had died, but you have no unknown number of how many enslaved perished. Maybe none didn't perish. Because they claim they didn't keep account of them. So by October 18th, they claimed that Ayan himself had died. So a new successor was chosen. They had disgruntled about who he was, and so they ended up divided into two different fractions. So, according to a historian, that some of the Negro slaves, right, set a fire to a leader's house. All the rest of them gathered, tried to kill them, and they managed to escape. But once again, you don't know how many of the so-called 100 you claimed you brought, because there was no records, but we know there was 100, they say, right? So according, this is going to be the first enslaved Africans known who were brought to the continent, the first to revolt. And this is what this 1526 is about. According to what they said, that they ran into the forest, never to be seen again. So they say that the remaining of the Spanish, they bailed on the settlement and sailed away. Because remember, they came with 3 boats. There was 2 left. Things got 2 out of, and they got out of there. But again, they said there was no mention of any enslaved Africans aboard those 2 ships returning back to either Hispaniola or back to Spain. So you're going to have indigenous people, or they try to stay as Africans. Okay? So they go on an article, they talk about it's impossible to know what happened to the Africans. They escaped into the forest. There's no written records. Then they pose a question as to, well, would the Sankori or any other indigenous group have recognized them as a victim of the Spanish and taken them in? Well, Francisco, right, seemed to have been able to pick up Spanish pretty good and quick. And so these Africans you say that came from Hispaniola, which probably could have been the indigenous of Hispaniola, coming over to the indigenous area of what you call the South Carolina, Georgia, United States form, will eventually become area. Why are you worried about that? Why would they not? If you could tell us the story of the expedition, what's that expedition? The Lewis and Clark expedition. Who was it that was able to translate for you in these so-called Indian areas? Wasn't it the Africans, right? You know, sometimes when you're trying to write some stuff, you just got to look at how people saying it. So an African that you can't translate, but an African can translate with the Indians and became your scout and became the one that was confided in, the one that they embraced and took in and allowed him to be. I guess they wouldn't have a problem. We're going to find out why, maybe not. Right? And so, so they want to pose the question, meaning, well, they probably died off too. They weren't still there. Well, that just go to show you that if these verses in 1526, which is 93 years before when you start talking about this 1619 business, then guess who's already been here before you were here? Huh? Okay. Let's move on. And so they talked about how they didn't know much about the Shikori. Then they tried to speculate and probably would have helped. Speculate and probably. See? No need, again, they don't need no speech. There's no reason for no speeches because you don't know. But you would like to make an assumption to divert the readers and those who are learning that there was no way there was no Africans because we can't be here before us, right? And then they postulate, well, Africans, they probably would help the Africans as long as they did not negatively impact their own preparation for winter. Huh? The negativity that has been the mantra to try to, let's say, stigmatize the entire group, negatively impact what you got going on. The Africans will come in negatively. Now, these ain't the Africans of today. These are the Black Americans of today. The same people we're going to eventually talk about as we go on. And then they talk about how possible. See, they're using the word possible. They're using the word probably. They're talking about speculate. That some of the Africans travel south as winter approached. Africans knew about the movement of the moon and the stars and would have known the weather would be warmer further south. See? This is all hypothesis. You're guessing. You don't know. But you have to speculate. You have to put probability is because why? Based on this story, there are some black folks already on this land before we're going to even talk about 1619. So they talk about the legends about Black Americans, the tri-racial isolated groups and maroon communities that abound, they said, in the southeastern United States. Let me say that one more again. The legends about Black Indians. What you mean by legends? Really? Is there really a legend, or is this have to be legendized, if that's a word, so that we have and can later on write so that it does not substantiate the probability of them being there when we know they were already there? Well, how you know that, Mr. Mrblowsurmind? Stay tuned. Stay tuned. So they talk about the Lumbee of North Carolina, surmise they are descendants from the Native Americans who intermarried with the white settlers and free African slaves. Now see, you went and found somebody of a tribe called the Lumbees of North Carolina, and they give you the story that how they became the Lumbees is that they were descendants from Native Americans, who intermarried with white settlers and free Africans. So now what you want to write, based on this particular group, is to say, well, if they were there, they probably all mixed in. They were not the same as how they originally came. Follow me? It wasn't like they were when they finally originally came. They weren't like that. It was all mixed up by now. So they also talked about how the brass ankles of South Carolina, said they're another legend. They're believed to have come from the intermarriage from runaways, African slaves, white indentured servants, and Native Americans. See? Of course we're going to find the one that's going to not be whole. We got to find the ones that's going to be quarter, because that makes you not whole, right? So it's part of us, part of them, and part of them. Now, we're going to get into this native. We're going to get into what is indigenous and what is American, right? And so according to, they said this story is basically a theory, just like everything else in this story after the fact of once the settlement of those who came died, got away and escaped, and fled. Anything after that part of the story is what? Theory. Right? So they said they were classified as free people of color before the Civil War. You want to talk about this group, the Bass group, right? You're talking about the Bass group. And then you talk about who? The Bass group, and then the Lumdi, right? These are the groups you're trying to substantiate. Let's go on, right? And so they pose a question. Could some of their ancestors be those of the very first runaway? So now what we're going to do is going to get Carter G. Woodson who observed and wrote, and he's a black historian back in 1920, and he says, one of the longest unwritten chapters in the history of the United States is that treating the relations of the Negroes and the Indians. See, Negroes and the Indians, not Africans and the Indians, but Negroes and the Indians. And we're going to find out more what this Negro is. Stay tuned. Hey, you sitting here watching the video. Why you sitting there? Put your hand on that like button, click it, thumbs it up, share this video, comment. You can like or dislike it. We don't care about that. And also, if you ain't over here and subscribe, what you waiting on? Get yourself on there and subscribe to get on up to WeUpReport so you can stay up, because we're going to keep you up. That's how you help keep this channel going. You can also do some monetary donations. We'll tell you about that later. But right now, wake yourself up, like, share, and comment. And don't forget, when you subscribe on that button, hit that put all notifications. You know how YouTube get down. All right, so we back, right? So that's that history so far that I'm giving you, correlating to the whole theme, which is about from Georgia and Linnentown, that was also in Georgia, and we talked about reparations in the poll. Then I'm giving you the history because everybody believes in 1619, but then there's the story of 1526. Now, as I told you in this story, one of the questions you need to ask yourself is this. All right, Mr. Mrblowsurmind, I heard you say that Francisco is ironic that he has the name Francisco as being an indigenous person who had nothing about Spain, according to the way that Aon and the scouts find. Why would an indigenous name be Francisco? Some people will say the history of the Moors. Some people will say, well, they just named. That's why I told you the name of Francisco in this origin in Latin means free man. So he became a free man when he came with them and went back to the queen, right? So what was his indigenous name? And the question becomes, when they come back from Spain and go back to Hispaniola, get the 100 so-called enslaved, and then come to the area of Georgia and South Carolina, and then what takes place according to the story, right? So those 70 that was taken with Francisco were the original ones. Then there's a possibility those from Hispaniola that end up coming as 100. They classify as Africans, but they may be the indigenous that was in Hispaniola. Now, we have to look at the fact that those dates, 1526, they talk about this in particular. But what I want to show you about the 1619 story, I want to show you something in history that will kind of non-void the 1619 by showing you the people who are claiming to be these people in 1619 couldn't have been there, because once you understand the game of how they organized this and who had the position of running it, then how could the 1619 be in the beginning of it? And then I'm going to show you as to who were those indigenous people there. Now, let me show you this, and we'll be right back. Now, this here might be for those who don't know anything about the history, but check this out. This is how that game was organized in order to substantiate when they were doing, as into who was in control and who were the people that were supposed to be facilitating. And look at the timeline. Here I go. Okay, so, you know, when you talk about the Dutch, the French, Portuguese, and English, there's a part of the history that a lot of people who know history or study a little bit about the slave trade, there's a particular part that must be looked at because it has its significance. It is to substantiate who is involved, how they got involved, and the time period that they are being involved. Okay, let me say that again. What I'm about to show you here is a significant point as to being able to substantiate dates, who they were, in a particular time they are in this game. Because the way that we kind of look at history, it seems like it's just one time and everybody is part of it. And that's to discombobulate you so that you cannot follow the trail. Especially when you come into decipher and trying to figure out who are the Aboriginals in this country that we call the United States. So when you study the history, they'll talk about a contract. There was a contract when Spain got involved, or when they were the ones who end up getting after the Dum Diversus and the Papal Bull and been decreed to get to the west, and then the Portuguese is getting the east, and the Spanish is getting the west. So now, once they acquired this land, how are they going to, well, let's say, who was going to be the ones that, according to their story, who are going to be the laborers of this? So, let me show you how they work this. Let me show you. So, this is what it was called, right? You see on your screen there, the acento, or they call it the contract. Okay, let me say that again. The acento, or contract. Okay? Now, prior to the Treaty of Utrecht, that's going to be in 1713, the first one who's going to get this contract is going to be the French, acquired in 1701. And what this contract is going to help them to do is the French is going to supply slaves to the Spanish colonies in America. Let me say that one more again. prior to the Treaty of Utrecht of 1713, the French is going to acquire this Jacinto contract in 1701 so that they can supply slaves to the Spanish colonies in America. And so this French trade is going to agitate the British. Okay? And they called it the illicit merchandise which was sent to the far reaches of Spain Empire in America. Right? They're going to have access to be able to put in their merchandise. And so much of it was on the French Guinea Company slave ship. So they accused the French of destroying the British forts and the settlements in Africa. It was the plundering of British slave ships and struggle for slaves to supply markets throughout the Americas. Okay? This is going to be setting this all up. Now the Jacinto is, again, the 1714, was established in 1714. It is the contract between the King of Spain and another power. Made at the peace, as I talk about this Utrecht of 1713, you're going to talk about how it's going to be Great Britain and how it's going to be furnishing so-called the African slaves to the Spanish colonies in the Americas. And then they're going to be abrogated in 1750. They're going to call this the Spanish Jacinto. Okay? This compact or this treaty is what they're establishing here, right? And those are going to be the ones who are going to actually work for them. They actually call this the Jacinto de Negros. Let's say that again. The Jacinto de Negros, which is the agreement of blacks. Let me say that again. Jacinto de Negros is the agreement of blacks. And it was the monopoly contract between the Spanish crown and, again, with various merchants. Again, they're going to be individualized because the way that the dumb verses end up splitting up, Spain couldn't go into the territory of getting the people who they needed, so they had to individualize it through merchants to get for them, according to the way they write this story, right? And this would give the rights to provide African slaves to colonies in the Spanish Americas, okay? And so the Spanish in itself rarely didn't engage, according to what they write, in the transatlantic slave trade directly. So what they would do is they would choose to have these contracts out for those to do importation to the foreign merchants and nations are prominent that was good in doing this. This is how they were doing it. Now, keep that in mind. Now, they talk about how typically they talk about the Portuguese and the Genoveses, or Genoveses, or how you want to say it. And then later on, you're going to get the Dutch and the French, and then you're going to get the British. Now, the Jacinto did not concern French or British Caribbeans, but Spanish America, okay? The Jacinto, what you see on your screen there, the contract, right, about the agreements of blacks. It did not concern French or British Caribbeans, okay? This here had nothing about supplying the workers or the slave people in the colonies of the French and the British, but only the Spanish America. So in 1479, they call it the Treaty of Alcacobas, which again is kind of like the dumb verses, which is divide the Atlantic Ocean and other parts of the globe into zones of influence. Spanish and Portuguese, right? And then you got the Spain acquired the west side and that of South America, and then you have the West Indies, right? While the Portuguese is getting the east and west coast of Africa. And they're also getting the Indian Ocean and beyond. So now, here it is, the Spanish need who? Supposedly they need African slaves. Now remember, they're writing this. This is what's been written in their history. Now the slave labor to make the American colonies make this project possible, as they call project. They lacked any trading or territory foothold in West Africa due to the way that they got split, right? So they don't have it. So now the principal source of what they say slave labor, the Spanish were relying on Portuguese slave traders for all their requirements. Now, this is in the beginning. There is nobody else that could supply, right? The Portuguese. Okay. And so what these contractors are going to do, they're going to get these foreign merchants. What foreign merchants were these banks. Okay? The banks are already involved in this. Okay? And they're going to cooperate with local and foreign traders. So you're going to have the banks and you're going to have the traders. Right? So they're all in cahoots. And they're only going to get the people who specialize in shipping. And then what they had to do, they had to bid for the rights to hold the Jacinto. So when they say there's no records, there's plenty of records out there, right? There's plenty of records because there was a lot of people involved. And it was kind of more figuring out who were the traders of the time, who were the banks of the time, and so forth and so on. So again, when they talk about the original impetus to import enslaved Africans was to relieve the indigenous inhabitants of the colonies from the labor demands of the Spanish colonies. Now, they said they were bringing in the African slave to relieve the inhabitants, the indigenous inhabitants who they were enslaving, right? That's what they say. And so the enslavement of the Amerindians, right? Supposedly they're going to halt. And then it was by the influence of the Dominicans, like Bartholomew de las Casas, right? Then Spain gave individual acentos to Portuguese merchants to bring slaves to South America. Okay? So specific people are having contracts, and if I'm not mistaken, I think it's only about like 4,000 per year that they could only do. So when they tell us hundreds of millions of people, you better go back and look at this. You better go back and read this history and understand this, right? So then there was the Treaty of Munster, where the Dutch merchants became involved in the Asunto de Negros, right? And so in 1713, you're going to have the British was awarded the right to the Asunto in the Treaty of Utrecht. Now that's 1713. This is when the British is getting in. They're telling you 1619, right? They're telling you this, but how did they get in if they didn't get the Asunto contract? They didn't get the rights until after the Treaty of Utrecht. Then they were officially in. And so that means that somebody originally might have had a Asunto contract that was part of Britain, right? Who's establishing again the Virginia Company, right? But they were not officially part of the Spain undertaking until they became part after the Utrecht Treaty, when it ended the War of the Spanish Succession. So what ended up happening is the British government is going to pass its rights to the South Sea Company. Okay? So now you got the British Asunto ended with the 1750 Treaty of Madrid. Okay? So the South Sea Company was the official governor and company of the merchants of Great Britain. It was trading to the South Seas and other parts of America, and for the encouragement of, they said, their fishery. Right? It was a joint stock company founded in January of 1711. Okay? This company is not founded till 1711. Like he tell us 1609 or 16, right? 1619, right? But who was that? And what really was that about? Right? So 1713, the company was granted a monopoly. Again, the Asunto de Negros. Supply African slaves to the islands in the South Seas and South America. That's originally. Nothing yet. It's telling you about where? United States. Nothing. I'll tell you about the United States, right? Nothing. So here they is. This is the contract. This is what it was all set up on. And so according to the way they've written in history, when do they start supplying those of the United States? Now remember, the story is 1526. It's talking about Ayan, and it's talking about sending out his scouts. See people there. Goes tell to the Queen of Spain. Again, like this Asunto, you got to get consent. You got to be agreed upon. He gets the okay. He goes in. They told to go there to make friends, but not to go in there to do anything to break that friendship. But he sends the scouts. The scout goes in there. They abduct 70 people. In that, he meets Francisco. He's angry about what took place. They go back to Spain with him. They reconvene and say, well, go back in there based on this conversation we having with him. Right? And then he uses those who come from Hispaniola, and then he brings 500 and 100 slaves. Where is those coming in from the United States? Show us where. We hear stories, but what history is not showing, who is it that's bringing them here, that you claim you bring in here, right? So the copper color indigenous people are already here. All right, so we back. So now the reason why I did the Acento contract is to try to show you the establishment of how, when they claim, according to history, the Portuguese West, Spain East, or actually reverse, Spain West and Portuguese East, and these were the only two players in the game. Then it became individualized for those supposedly who are going to now fill in what they claim they bring it into the Spanish colonies. You had to go contract in order to set that up. So how can they tell us 1619 when the Acento contract is establishing 1701 originally is going to be with the Dutch, it's going to be doing what it's doing, but it's still not talking about supplying, right? Because the Portuguese is the one who got the one in the West. So when is this so-called transatlantic slave trade taking place? No one can really establish it. It's just a story. But we know, according to what the 1526 said, that there's indigenous people. You even give him this so-called Francisco, and we are still trying to understand why would an indigenous man or indigenous people be named Francisco when you meet them in your name, you from Spain, right? So you more like a Francisco than an indigenous person. And then when you tell us when you come back, you're bringing them, but you don't say you're bringing them from West Coast Africa. You come up from Hispaniola, which is going to have a myth of story telling us that you're telling people who's supposed to be already, you done killed them off in Hispaniola, and the Africans are bringing them. But that's not what you say. You say nearly, but nearly is a number of how many and how many remains. So there could be indigenous that you're bringing from Hispaniola, bringing them over to the lands that were going to be considered the United States. So now my thing is, who are the Aboriginal people? Let me show you what they're talking about. Who are the Aboriginal people? All right, so next part to this, to add on more to this 1526, is because we have to look at, according to that story in 1526, there's two parts to this story, right? One was that according to that 1526 story, they're bringing 100 people, as they say, enslaved Africans from Hispaniola. They didn't tell you that they came off a ship directly coming from West Coast Africa. They told you the story of Ayan going back to Spain after they reneged on the instructions and enslaved 70. One of them, he confides with him, becomes friends with him. His name happened to be Francisco, learns Spanish, goes back before the king and queen, gets reassigned, gets 500 colonists, 100 enslaved, they say, Africans, and they traverse and go back into the area which we call South Carolina and Georgia. But remember, Francisco was part of the original people of the 70 indigenous people. He was not part of those from Hispaniola, correct? So if he's not part of those from Hispaniola, who was Francisco? Who was the Francisco and those 70 indigenous, and what people did they belong to? Well, let me show you something here. Okay? Who are the copper color Aboriginals? Let me say that again. Who are the copper color Aboriginals? Okay? Yeah. Who are the copper color Aboriginals people, right? Now they talk about the copper color because these are some of the writings of those who, from Christopher Columbus and all those who call themselves exploring gave an account, and then I will show you somebody else who wrote something later on to give more to substantiate of the image that you see on your screen, right? So who are the color or the copper color Aboriginals? Now they say that the copper color has been documented. Aboriginals have lived on the American continent for over 50,000 years. Let me say that one more again. They say that the copper color Aboriginals lived on the American continent for over 55,000 years. So, if we figure out who are the copper color people, as it was said according to the story of 1526, who, some ironicness, became the name of what they say Francisco, right? Then we should know who Francisco and those people who were there. And then I will give you something that might help to substantiate all these claims, right? Now, when you talk about American Indians, right? What is an American Indian? What is a native, right? Well, a native is just what they say natural or inborn, or hereditary connected with something in a natural way. That's all a native is, right? Right? If you look at what they said as a noun of native in the mid-15th century, it says person born in bondage, one born a serf or a villain. In the 1600s, they said original inhabitants of non-European nations where Europeans hold political power. Well, they give an example of American Indian. Let me say that again. Natives, as an adjective, is natural, inborn, hereditary, connected with something in a natural way. The noun, when they talk about natives, when you talk about in the mid-15th century, persons born in bondage, one born a serf, a villain. 1600, original inhabitant of non-European nations where Europeans hold political power. Example, an American Indian. Now, what is an American? Right? According to the 1828, which I'll go in later on. We'll get into that. We'll go into that later. So anyway, I'll get more into that. So 50,000 years, accordingly, they say that these Aboriginals have been on the land. But when you do a little research, they got to claim that the American Indians, now Aboriginal and American Indians, and using the term Indian is two different things. The American part, but not the Indian part, right? So when you do some research, and you might find, again, everybody have different publications unless you're getting it off of Wikipedia, but if you have and own books, encyclopedias and things of that sort, you may get different information that seem to connect, but this is what they had said, that the American Indians probably crossed the Bering Straits from Asia, and they say about 12,000 years ago. Now, according to this article that I'm reading in front of you, they said 55,000 years, which means that they coming after they had, these Aboriginals had already been here and established, right? And they say by the time that Christopher Columbus come in 1492, now again, they guessing. But they guess will substantiate for many people to be facts when they say probably no more than 2 million Native Americans. You didn't do a count, you didn't have a census, but the number 2 million fits about the way we're going to write this story and to make it so that when they no longer, it didn't make it much bigger. But you tell me that a people, according to what they wrote, and said that they had been on in this area, on this continent, this country, for 12,000 years, and you only going to tell me there's only going to be 2 million people? There's only going to be 2 million, y'all. Okay. And so this is going to be the land that's going to become the United States. Now, what they don't tell you about in history is that these people here are the players in the game when they talked about this whole history of transatlantic slave and colonizing and so forth. You know, you have the Spanish, you got the Dutch, you got the French. There's going to be the Portuguese part as well. And then you also going to have, lastly, the English part. And all this is coming, as they say, in the late 15th century. But they know for a fact, as we just talked about with 1526, that Spanish established the first permanent settlement, they say, at St. Augustine, which became what they call the Floridas. Now, those who do history and know that Florida, what we call today, was not just that area. The Floridas covered, like you've seen, that Georgia, South Carolina. Floridas was wide. It was not just that state. It covered all that area at one particular time, right? We talk about them conquistadors and all that stuff. But they set up the settlement of St. Augustine, which became the Floridas, but they said in 1565. Remember, that story said 1526, okay? And so from 1565, setting up the Floridas, then they create what they call New Mexico in 1599. And then we get the story later on how the English founded Jamestown, Virginia, 1607. Then you're going to have the Plymouth Company in 1620, 1624. You're going to have Fort Orange, Albany, New York, New Amsterdam in 1626, and so on and so forth. So now, what we're going to find out here is, let me go on and let me fill in these things that you need to know, because you got to know that how did this all get established? But we got to make sure you understand about who these Aboriginals are. So they say many early documents describing the phenotypes of the Aboriginal Americans prior to the European invasion, they quote Harriet Beecher Stowe, who was the author of the famed book of those who ever got the chance to read, of Uncle Tom's Cabin, which goes back in 1853. And according to Harriet Beecher Stowe, she describes the details of the phenotype of the Aboriginal American in her book called The Primary Geography for Children on an Improved Plan. Let me say that again. Harriet Beecher Stowe. The book called Uncle Tom's Cabin of 1853 describes in detail the phenotype of the Aboriginal Americans in her book called The Primary Geography for Children on an Improved Plan in 1833. Now, this is before the white people came to the Americas. Now, it had many tribes of people in it. Some of these tribes still remain in the United States and in the countries north of it and in South America. These are what they call the American race. They have a copper color skin, long black hair, small dark eyes, and very thick lips and broad noses. Harriet Beecher Stowe, 1833. Let me say that one more again. These is her words from her writing. Before the white people came over to America, it had many tribes of people in it. Some of these tribes still remain in the United States and in the countries north of it and in South America. These form what they are called the American races. They have a copper color skin, long black hair, small dark eyes, and very thick lips and broad noses. Let's let you see. Okay? So that's what Harriet Beecher Stowe quoted from her publication of what she had stated of her description. Okay? Now, let's get into some more of this as we go on. Now, they had showed some figurines of what they showed. So let me show you what they showed. Right? So you see to your left, far left, you have Africa. To the right of that is Asia. To the right of that is Europe. And to the right of that is the Americas. Right? There are figurines that are representing the images of the places and the people up there. And as you can see, the America one is showing a depiction of a melanated person, not fair skin as you see the Asian and Europe one, but you see that. Now, does that substantiate and validate that? That is somebody who gave the representation of what they're talking about. Right? That was what they did. Now, I want you to see this here is going to be the American Dictionary of the English Language by Noah Webster. As you see on there, you see 1828. So in 1828, Noah Webster is going to give, according to his writing, who did he say that the Aboriginal people are, right? So I want to make sure you see the publication from which that is going to come out of. And it says this: American, adjective pertaining to America. American, noun, a native of America, originally applied to the Aboriginals or copper color races found here by the Europeans, but now applied to the descendants of Europeans born in America. Let me say that again, and let me let you see it. American, adjective pertaining to America. American, noun, a native of America, originally applied to the Aboriginals or copper color races found here by the Europeans, but now applied to the descendants of European born in America. So, as I was saying earlier, who are the original Americans? As you see what Webster said, and remember, this is not us saying what we're saying. This comes out of the publication that we did not write. It come out of Noah Webster's, right? American Dictionary of the English Language of 1828, right? So that's not, if anybody who has any problem and trying to say, oh, you're making that up. Well, you argue with Noah Webster if you can find him. Otherwise, you're going to have to take what he wrote as verbatim, okay? And so, again, as she said, that we talk about American, the native or inhabited, right? I take that back. No. Again, originally, from the beginning or origin, that's what Aboriginals is, right? Original, primitive, Aboriginal people and the first inhabitants of a country, right? That's what that is. So when Ayan comes and meets Francisco, he's an indigenous, right? But they never gave a description of what Francisco looked like. But what we're going to do is to come back when we're going to go to Hispaniola, and then we're going to say, we bring in people here, and then he's going to come back. So you never described, you never said who Francisco, so now we don't meet any of them. The 70 that we take, 69 died, and we only got Francisco, and he goes back and goes in, but there's never no description who they were. The name seems not to be fitting, because I don't know why an indigenous person would be named Francisco unless you said Francisco was a person who had really came from Spain at one time, or his people been in Spain, which could be for some people who saying about another particular people, which we'll talk about at another time. But anyway, So to go further on in this article, it talks about the discovery of the Lusia woman, right? Lusia woman. And they talked about how recent scientific studies have found a link between the DNA of Aboriginal Americans and the Aborigines of Australia. Let me say that one more again. Discovery of Lusia woman. Recent scientific studies have found a link between the DNA of Aboriginal Americans and the Aborigines of Australia. In 1975, archaeologist Annette Laming in Prairie found the 11,500-year-old skeleton remains of an ancient Brazilian woman whom they named Luzia. The remains were found in a cave in Lampa Vermelha, Brazil. Richard Naive of Manchester University, who undertook a forensic facial reconstruction of Luzia, described it as a Negroid. Anthropologists have described Luzia feature as resembling those of Negroids, indigenous Australians, Malaysians, and the Negritos of Southeast Asia. Dr. Walter Neves, an anthropologist at the University of Sao Paulo, had this to say regarding Luzia. This is what, according to what he said. We can no longer say that the first colonizers of the Americas came from the north of Asia, as previous models had proposed. This skeleton is nearly 2,000 years older than any skeleton ever found in the Americas, and it does not look like those of Amerindians or North Asians. Larry Roter, 1999. Let me say that one more again. We can no longer say that the first colonizers of the Americas came from the north of Asia, as previously modeled have proposed, or previous models have proposed. This skeleton is nearly 2,000 years older than any skeleton ever found in the Americas, and it does not look like those of Amerindians or North Asians. Larry Roter. Hey, you sitting here watching the video. Why you sitting there? Put your hand on that like button, click it, thumbs it up, share this video, comment. You can like or dislike it. We don't care about that. And also, if you ain't over here and subscribe, what you waiting on? Get yourself over there and subscribe to get on up to We Up Report so you can stay up, because we're going to keep you up. That's how you help keep this channel going. You can also do some monetary donations. We'll tell you about that later. But right now, wake yourself up, like, share, and comment. And don't forget, when you subscribe on that button, hit that put all notifications. You know how YouTube get down. $19.99, right? Huh? So, you want to see what they reconstructed, what they showed? Let me show you something. Huh? Look at that now. That's a reconstruction of what they put in there, right? Luzia woman drawing. That was a drawing. And then they did the recreation of Luzia one, right? And then they showed the skull in Brazil. Right? So did Francisco look like them? Was not disclosed. But we know we're going to take them Africans that we brought from Hispaniola over there. We know they African, but we never got any depiction or description of what Francisco was, right? So we kind of figured that somebody don't want to tell something, right? So according to those findings that you just seen were all shown and explained in details in a 1999 BBC documentary entitled "The First Americans Were Australians." Okay? First Americans were Australians. So they talk about how this archaeology research dates back to about 1975 to 1999. And there's more recent research that has been conducted on this subject. So for those who need to go further into this, there is more information out there for you, right? All right. All right. So now, okay. Yes, let's go there, right? All right. So those are what we consider the Aboriginals. So that means that the people who were there prior to, even when Ayan came to send out his scouts, but he never said and they never disclosed what the scouts seen. They just tell you they scouted out the area. They found the area of Georgia and South Carolina, but never specified what they saw. Well, now that's just in that article. If you need to, I would think that those who have more inquisitive nature to seek buried treasure, I'm giving you a starting place for you to go back and to look further, to delve deeper so that you can have even more for yourself, right? But there's two people here now. You have those that's possibly coming that from over there in Hispaniola, but they're not specifying who they were. It could have been Iraq. There's other indigenous people that are in this Hispaniola, but they try to already tell you they were already dead by the time they making this traverse. Well, Columbus only come in 1492, so you tell me in 1520 already you done killed them all off in that little bit of time, right? So okay, if that's what you want to say, fine. But I ain't done yet. I got one more to seal the deal. All right, I got one more to give. Right now, this one here, some people are not going to like this, but remember, I didn't write none of it. Right? I'm just the messenger. You understand? I'm just the messenger. You take it, leave it alone, how you want to do it. It's up to you. Okay? So let me show you a particular book that I myself own. Right? I'm going to share this book with those people who need to know. Right? I'm going to show you something here that I see a lot of brothers and sisters who they doing a lot of talking, and that's good. That we're out here sharing information, talking about certain things, delving, getting deeper. And again, where does this fit as into the reparations? Well, that's the reason why we have to look at all this. So I have a book that I had for some time, and it's a book written by Elias Boudinot, right? Elias Boudinot. Elias Boudinot. And the book is called Star in the West, or a humble attempt to discover the long lost 10 tribes of Israel, preparatory to their return to their beloved city, Jerusalem. Right? That's the book right there. You don't see the T at the end of that O, but it should be one there, right? Okay, so let's blow my mind. Okay, we see this book. What are you talking about? Now you're talking about the lost 10 tribes of Israel. What you talking about here? Well, again, this book was written in 1815. Okay, this book was written in 1815, and what I want you to see is, I think it's on page 125, about 128. It's going to, let me show you something. Chapter 5, right? Going to talk about how there was hundreds to thousands of tribes in this land. Let me say that one more again. They talk about how there were hundreds and thousands of different tribes. Remember, in the 1526 story, Francisco was taken by the scouts who took 70 indigenous people, right? But they never specified if they were all of the same nations, tribes, people, and they just know that they just took some people and brought them back. Francisco gets back and goes back. Remember, he tells an elaborate story in Spain about how wonderful his country is, and so forth and so on. And then remember, he talking about he was of the Shakori people, right? Well, let me show you what it showed Elias Boukno. Now, guess what? If Aeon and them is doing this, right? 1526. Harriet Beecher Stowe is writing in 1833. He's writing in 1815. Well, let me show you some of the names that they have. Now, they didn't have all of them, but in this particular book, they got almost 300. And these are some of the names that you see on your screen, right? Kamasians, Erohatos, Assassinis, the Arastapi, Kosas, Avayals, the Adex, the Apotomax, Akotronax, Akomax, the Abenakis, Kias, the Algonkins, the Amelistas, the Asinabols, the Agans, the Arkanas, or Arkansas, the Agagwaks, or whatever the fuck that is. No disrespect to my peoples, right? But you see the names on here, right? There's a lot of names on here. And there's another one, right? Right? There's a lot of names on here, right? Pequot you see up on there, right? The Potomowak, right? Powhatans, the Seminoles, right? We're seeing these names on here, right? And that's coming out of this book. Right? So, right? So that means when they talk about the 5 civilized tribes, there was way more than 5 civilized tribes. Those were just the 5 tribes that they, again, kind of like the same when you look at the story with Francisco. Oh, he became friends because he learned Spanish, and then he would help you to try to do what you do. And so they made deals, right? So they made deals with him. And so the 5 nations that made the deals gets acknowledged by, right, by the usurper, the colonizer, and everybody else will be subjugated, put on plantations. Yes, some got killed, but you didn't kill them all because you've been here too long, huh? Everybody going to keep saying we don't want to be Africans. We don't want to be Africans. But we want to give it to these other people because the story they told us that somebody came from Bering Straits and been here. But let me ask you this question. If you say we the first people on the planet, right? We the first people on the planet, which means we probably traversed this whole planet. We've been there. But you want to relegate us to one area only and specific. If we are to be the first inhabitants of this planet and we have traversed, and then they say about what they call the Pangea, right? They told you that the Pangea happened. If you believe that about the Pangea and you say we've been on here for eons, that's uncountable by us being here. Let's just say when the Pangea happened, when it was all one land mass, when there was no water to cross over between the Atlantic and for that what you say West Africa that would have connected what is South America, and South America would have connected to what we the United States, and some people were talking about the Mu and Atlantis, right? So let's say as we've been here, because everybody will just take that Africa is the only place that we could have been and originate from, because the person has told you that he found the oldest bone, and the oldest bone says this is the originator of man, locking you into one place. There's nothing wrong with being from Africa and having the mineral rich and resource and all that. The whole planet is ours. But the thing is, if we were all traversing all these other parts of this land and a catastrophe takes place, let's say the Pangea happens and it does a split. Now the people that was on this side from South America, they got split from that with the West Coast Africa and couldn't get through or get back. We just gonna hypothetically speaking, since they said this is what took place, then that means the people that were once upon a time originally on the continent of this one landmass, but because of the split, that don't mean they still not the same people. That's just the split has separated you, and now you have started life anew and couldn't get back. So now what you do, you just stop living, or we just gonna proceed on and we mourn. We were trying to find ways. Maybe we couldn't get it right. It took us some time, but while in time between time, we got to live. We still living. We're still learning or whatever we're doing. Does that mean that we still not these people, but we just have to be on this part? So you say, oh, these people here are pretendians, or these people just faking this, and you don't want to be this. You're landlocking us as if we are not the original of this planet. We've been everywhere. And what you want to do is let somebody take it. And when you start opening the door for Dracula, you know all it takes is get his foot in and he going to do the rest. Because one day down the line, you're going to find out that bone in that ground that they say is Lucy, they're going to come out and that genetics going to be them. This is the most hated show in the black corner of YouTube. All right, that's going to be it for this show. I really didn't want to do a 3-hour show, but I did. I want to thank each and every one of you for who are in here. And hopefully, if you're new, you like what's over here. We've been doing the report. We've been metamorphing over the years. Again, I've been around for 9 years, but you wouldn't know, actually almost 10 years, but you wouldn't know I was existing that long, because why? I'm the most hated show in the black corner of YouTube. Did a video back in April 1st, 2014 that went viral. When shows in the black corner wouldn't go viral, I did. I made a video. If you didn't see it, you wouldn't know it. And from that day forward, from 2014, they said this channel will never grow ever again from there. So you think you look and say, damn, how could somebody been around 9-10 years and can't get 100 views? Ask yourself, then what is he talking about that they don't want heard? So if you like what you heard, you want to see some more of the stuff we do, go over there and hit that subscribe button and do all what you do. Again, this is the most hated show in the black corner. Until my next show, y'all. Until the next show.
Portions of the following program may be unsuitable for younger or more sensitive viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.